Anything people want to go over on the first assignment, or I think I'm recording. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we're here February 1st. So your next assignment is due in a couple of weeks. I've released it already. I always do it too early. There's something I wanted to change, but now that it's out, I'm just going to stick with it. But yeah, it's up on CU Learn. It starts with a little bit of boolean logic, which is the stuff that we are taking today. How is the audio? Is anyone else having trouble hearing me, or it's good? Okay. Yeah, so there's a little bit of boolean logic at the beginning, just so you know, just to show that you guys know how to do it, which is the stuff that we went over last class a little bit. We'll do some more today. So show every step, please. And then we'll get into some drawing using Python Turtle. So that should be hopefully a little bit of fun. We'll start really simple. Draw some robot face, or you can do a Minecraft face if you like. And then a little bit of just simple taking input from the user, and a little bit of math for question 3. And then some more drawing, just simple stuff for question 4. So you want to draw a block and a little bit of grass on the top. So you can do either of these. 1 bonus mark for doing the multiple. It does not seem like a big difference. And once you get used to it, it's not a big difference. But initially, um, just placing all these things geometrically together on the screen can sometimes be a little bit tricky at first. Then draw an evergreen tree using a triangle and a rectangle or a square. And then this last question will be using while loops and input from the user to draw a forest somewhere. So then the end result should look something like this, right? And bonus marks for taking color from the user and then making your trees that color. So yeah, have a look at that. You have a couple weeks, 6 questions, a lot of it drawing related. But any questions while we're here? Okay. Let's see here. All right, so let's get back to our lesson then, which was we were talking about Boolean logic, which is relevant for your first question. So this was where we left off. I think this is, let me check here. Yeah, so we started talking about, so it's easy enough when everything's in brackets. Well, I mean, hopefully you find it easy. So you choose, say, the innermost bracket, and you start by evaluating those expressions. So this will evaluate to true, and this will evaluate to false, since not false is true, and false and true is false. And then everything else gets copied down, right? So these are just copied down from above. Sorry, this should be going to this one, and then these are copied over. And then you evaluate the next innermost brackets, so that would be this one, and you get true. This is copied down and true, and that evaluates to true. So that's how you do it. These look long and complicated, but if you do them step by step, then they're fine. The same thing again, this one, no, not this one. Yeah, this one evaluates a little bit differently since, okay, so this first goes to false. And then we can evaluate over here. This evaluates to true. And then we end up with true or false and false. So now we don't have the brackets to tell us which order to evaluate these in. So the order is that we do the ands first and then the ors. So it's brackets, the not operator, the and operator, and then the or operator. So that's the order that we do these. When can we expect to see grades for assignment 1? Generally, I give the TAs about a week. You know, as long as everything goes well for them. I especially in the beginning of the semester, I don't think anybody's too busy. So early next week, I would say. Certainly before assignment 2 is due. All right, and so again, we can go through and simply, so this would be, in a sense, the deepest set of brackets, and then inside the brackets, we evaluate the not first, right? So then this evaluates to true, and then this is inside the deepest set of brackets again, so we evaluate the true and true. That evaluates to the true here. The next one that we want to evaluate is this not false. So that evaluates to true. Is not evaluated before and or? Yes, not is evaluated first. So it's always brackets, not, and then or. As long as, you know, and brackets are first. So a lot of times, and I think even on your assignment, I make the brackets explicit. It's just always easier that way. But this true and true evaluates to true. True or true also evaluates to true, and then true and true evaluates to true. So each of these individually, of course, if you don't remember specifically how they evaluate, then you can get out your truth table, which are a couple slides back, and that'll show you, you know, if I have x, y, and then x and y, then true, 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 false, 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 true, false, 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 false. So you can just simply look it up, right? So if I don't remember how this evaluates, or how, I guess this is the same one, but I can just look it up in my truth table. Can we double check with command prompt for question 1? Absolutely, yeah. Just show your work. So, I mean, it's easy enough to get to the right answer in any case, but yeah, the main thing is that you understand how to do it. I don't even really care if you get the right or wrong answer, although you will get marks for getting the right answer, but that's not really the lesson, is how you do it. And so here we have a algorithm for simplifying logic expressions. So until we have one term, so this one term we mean true or false, then we say, well, if there are inner brackets, we resolve these first. Otherwise, we apply the operations in order. So, and yeah, so we've used, this is a pseudocode. This is not, you know, we often use pseudocode when we're talking about algorithms, because it's sort of divorced from any specific programming language. And so we're more concerned with the logic at that point than with the, you know, syntax of the language. So yeah, this is pseudocode, but we'll also see similar code today written in Python. Specifically, we will see these if statements. All right, so some more examples. So if I have true or false, that evaluates to true. Next step, I'll evaluate this not false, again, because it's in, 1, because it's in the deepest set of brackets, and 2, because we evaluate the not first before the and. So that becomes true, and then we're going to look inside this deepest set of brackets. All right, and now everything's in the same set of brackets, so we are just going strictly on order of operations. Not true. Now we have false or true. So when you have two ors or two ands, we just go left to right. So we would evaluate this one first, and then whatever this gives us, well, this gives us false. And then we evaluate the second one, true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it looks like I skipped a step there. So if you have false or true, sorry, what did I do wrong there? False or false? Yeah, false or true. Yeah, I skipped a step, but you should not skip a step. All right, questions on evaluating Boolean expressions? All right, I've got a couple more examples. Again, it's choose the deepest brackets, evaluate the knots first, then evaluate what's in the brackets. And then from there, we have all of these things on the same level, so to speak, in the same set of brackets. So we're going to do the and before we do the or. So true and true gives us true, and that gives us false or true, which gives us true. And maybe you're thinking, does it really matter if I do, is it really going to change the values? And maybe not in this case. So in this case, if I did this one first, that's false or true. I would evaluate to true, and then true and true also gives true for a final answer. So in this case, it wouldn't have made a difference, but there are cases where it does make a difference. So it is important to remember the order of operations. All right, so now let's see. The reason we learned all that is so that we could use it in Python. So when we talk about in Python a condition, it's just something that evaluates to true or false. So this is a Boolean expression. And a Boolean expression is any expression that will evaluate to true or false. So for instance, 7 double equals 8. So anybody know what that double equals means? Yeah. So if I put, let's see here. So that's the comparison operator, right? So the single equals is assignment. So if I say 7 double equals 8, I get that false. If I try to use a single equals, it's going to complain at me because I can't assign. It's expecting to see a variable here. And it says, well, this is actually a value and I can't assign another value to that. It uses the word literal, but that's what that means. So single equals is for assignment. I want to assign a value to this variable. Double equals is comparison. So in this case, I could take, so I've assigned a value to A, it has 8 in it. Now I can compare that to 7. So I can compare the value in my variable to another value. And it'll tell me, well, these are not equal. If I said 8 equals 8, that gives me true, or A equals 8, or 7, sorry. What did I assign it? Oh, sorry, A is equal to 8. That gives me true. All right. Another comparison is, of course, the less than or the greater than. So I can say 7 less than 8, and that is true. 7 greater than 8, that gives me false. And I keep hitting, I just keep hitting that by accident. That backslash means nothing. It's right beside my enter key. All right, so how we use them, is it arbitrary, or is there a reason why true or false gives true? Is it arbitrary, or does it serve a particular purpose? It's not arbitrary. It's sort of modeled after the English language and this concept of whether I'm being honest or not, right? So if I say, it is raining and I'm going to the store, then if either of those things are false, then I've basically told you something that's not true, right? But if I said, it is raining or I'm going to the store, then as long as one of those is true, then I've told you the truth. So yeah, it does sort of mimic the language a little bit, although not exactly, right? Because I can say, if I say, I flip a coin and it comes up heads or tails, then what I really mean is it can't be both, right? So when we use or logically, what we mean is that either this or that or both. Yeah. And also, it mirrors logic circuits, right? So there are actual circuits in my computer that, you know, if I get two positive voltages, it's called an OR gate. So it will give me a positive voltage out. Or if I have at least one positive voltage, it'll give me a positive voltage out. And there's also AND gates and NOT gates and things like that. So that's how your computer does logic. And it's, you know, I guess probably modeled after you know, logic as a concept was around before computers. So it's probably modeled after that. All right, so usage, if 7 equals 8, print math is mysterious. So let's try that. So now we're getting into programming. This is an if statement. And what this does will tell us so it'll allow our programs to make decisions. Math is mysterious. All right, and then I hit enter and it'll execute that and nothing printed. So now if I do the same thing, but I change the condition. So if I say if 7 is less than 8, which is something we will know evaluates to true, then I would say math is working. And it prints out math is working. Right, because in this case, so in the first case, it evaluated to false, so it did not execute this statement. In the second case, it evaluated to true, so it did execute this statement. So that's in general how we use this Boolean logic in Python in order to help our program make decisions. So we're going to go into a lot more depth and detail into these if statements, but that's sort of the introduction to it. Okay, so we can compare numbers or text to get true or false, right? So the double equals is equality, the less than, the greater than. So I can use those with text as well, eh? So if I say A less than B, I get true because A comes before B alphabetically. What's really happened is these are being converted to numbers, but the numbers sort of correspond with their position in the alphabet. So it can determine alphabetical order. And I can even say ABC less than BBC or BBB. And that's true as well, since that comes before, ABC comes before BBB. I can say less than or equal to, right? So if I said A less than or equal to B, that's true. 3 less than or equal to 4, that's true. 3 less than or equal to 3, that's also true. And then I can also say, of course, greater than or equal to, and I get similar results. Not equal to, so yeah, there is a couple ways to write it. So without the quote, the letters would be interpreted as empty variables. That's correct, yes. And in fact, it probably wouldn't understand them. If I said A, well, I did declare an A, so, but I didn't declare B. So now it's going to say the name B is not defined. So if I said B is equal to, yeah, now it's telling me because A is a number and B is a string, it can't compare them. There's a type error. So, all right, so I could say A not equal to, I think it'll let me do this actually. Yeah, so I can say they're not equal to each other and that'll say true. If I say this, it'll say false. Another way to say not equal though is I think I can do this. True, right? So if I want to say two things are not equal, I can use this exclamation mark and equals, or I can write not and then use the equality operator. Yeah. Yes, and this is, you know, early on in programming, if you're not experienced, this is a very common error to make, so just be aware of it. In the one case, I'm assigning a value, and now if I'm, you know, it's quite easy to say, well, I'm trying to compare A and B. I could actually do something like this, not A equal B. Can't assign to that operator. No, but I can just, I could mean to write this and actually write this, and the code's not going to complain. We say A such that 0 less than A less than 5. That's a good question. So let's say A is 4, 0 less than A less than 5. True. Yeah, see, Python, it's always Python's a nice flexible language. It goes out of its way to make things easy for you. That being said, you will still be frustrated by it. So if you try and compare a numeric variable with a string variable by saying not equal, it will work? Yes. So it can do, I can't compare which is greater than the other because that really doesn't make sense, right? Unless I did it as a number, unless I wrote my number as a string. But I could say two things not equal to each other in terms of A not equal to 9 or A equal to 9. Yeah, those are fine. So any, I guess, variables, any values will work with equals and not equal. Right. Any other questions? All right. Good questions. Okay, so if true, print hello, right? So I can just, instead of any condition, it's any condition that evaluates to a boolean. So I could actually just write a boolean in there. And then it prints out hello. I could do this. It's not going to let me do that. All right. Well, if false, print nothing, and it'll print nothing. Yeah, I can compare variables to strings. So I can say if weather is equal to rainy, print bring an umbrella, it's raining. That's fine. Yeah, so these are just examples of if statements. If my grade is greater than or equal to 50, then I pass the course. So the general format of an if statement is as follows. So the condition is, of course, some Boolean expression that will evaluate to true or false. I have to have a colon after the condition. So syntax is very important, as you guys, some of you are aware of, and if not, you will be, because, you know, even I still make the mistakes of I leave a colon off and then I get an error and have to track it down. And then, so all my code to be run after that is going to be indented, right? So I can put multiple lines of code to be run after this if statement, as long as they're all indented with the same indentation, then it'll run them all. And then after that is finished executing, this piece of code will run. So this piece of code is on the same indentation level as my if statement. So once my if is done executing, or if the condition is false, then it'll run this piece of code. All right, so everything indented is run. If the if condition is true, this is called an if block. All right, so we talk about blocks of code. So this is, by block of code, I mean something that's going to run, you know, together, so to speak. So this block either gets run or it doesn't. Be sure to indent, and then the next block of code, which is not indented, will be run regardless. So if you work in Java or something else like that, or C or C++, they often use squiggly brackets to show that something is a block of code. But in Python, everything is indented. So the indentations are very important. And you can't mix tabs and spaces. All right, so it will complain at you. Luckily, you could do something like this. Oh, this is not an actual. Can you have a condition in a conditional? Yeah, sure. Right. I mean, if I understand you correctly, so I can have, I can write complex stuff like if 7 equals 8 and, 7 is less than 9. So this is or 3 equals 3. I mean, each of these you could think of as its own individual little condition. So I can, this can get as complicated as you like. Yeah, so it's true. I think that or is what put it over, right? And then you would evaluate, so it, in an indented block, yep. And we're going to get to that. So, yeah, so what he's asking is, yeah, if 2 plus 2 equals 4, then yeah, so I can, in a sense, my code is now branching off, but I can, and I can branch it off as many times as I like. And we'll see lots of actually different ways that you can accomplish similar things without getting too messy with your code. Is there a limit on how many indentations deep you can go? Not that I'm aware of, although that's a good question, actually. So in practice, if there is a limit, you will almost certainly not run into it, but there might be. I would have to look into that. That's a good question. I don't know. I will look into that, actually. I have never, in years and years of programming, ever run into a limit. So if there's a limit, it's very, very high. Yeah. All right. So you can sort of think of your code and this little if statement and this little separate block of code. So if we drew it out in a flow chart, it would look something like this, right? So we enter our first 2 lines of code would occur up here. So we do some input. Sorry, let me get this straightened out a bit. So we get some input up here. And then we come down, and then based on those inputs, we either go through this piece of code and print this out and then come to the bottom, or we skip this piece of code and we just go straight to the have a nice day. Right, so you can draw it out in flowcharts, and we'll see actually, as somebody asked before or just a minute ago, if I put another if statement here, then I would put another branch in my flowchart. We'll see an example of that coming up. Okay. Yeah, actually, let's keep going here. I was going to run that, but I think we can. All right, and so here, I guess we didn't take input yet either, right? So this might be a good time to do that, actually. So let's take this piece of code. And let's make a new file. So I want to, instead of running things off the interpreter now, I want to run a piece of code. I want to save it and then run it later whenever I want. So let's see here. Class code, yeah. So we can just write test. Okay, so now I can run this. Now this input is going to take enter number 5, enter 6, enter, and it skips that and says have a nice day. So yeah. It would look too messy if you had too many. Yeah, okay, so there's a couple comments. We're going to address that. So we get into what's called there's a couple things you can do to mitigate that, because sometimes you want to branch out in a lot of different directions. You can use what's called a switch statement, or you can use what's else if. So these ELIF, we'll see how to use them in a minute. I do want to draw your attention to the inputs though. So up till now, I guess I've been skipping them. Now might be a good time to address them. So I could take input from the user, right? So I can say A equals input, please enter a number. And then I could print that number. Right? So let's just, for now, we will ignore this stuff. All right, so when I run this, it says, please enter a number. I enter 5, it prints out 5. If I said B equals input, let's format this a little bit better. I could say total equals A plus B, and then print total. You thought Python doesn't have switch statements? Pretty sure they do. Let me see. Oh, maybe they don't. Yeah. No, I guess they don't explicitly. You're right. You can use else if, or you can actually design one yourself. Yeah. I'm thinking of, I guess, every other single language. All right, so I've entered 2 numbers, A and B, and then I've added them together, and it printed out 67 instead of 13. So what's happening here is when I take input from the user, I'm getting a certain type, right? So I can print out the type of my input. So even though I'm entering a number here, say 55 and 66, it's still a class string. So anytime I use input, it takes whatever I type as input and converts it to a string and stores it in these variables. All right, so I have to be very careful when I want to do math, because it's not going to do, if I do A plus B, it's going to do string concatenation, right? It takes this string of 55 and this string of 66 and puts them together into a new string that combines these two. So what I want to do is say A equals int A. So I'm going to cast the value in A to an integer. So we saw how to do that a little while ago. Now we're going to actually start using it. And I'm going to do the same thing for B. Yeah, you don't need these spaces. I like to put spaces just so for readability. But yeah, you can actually jam everything together if you want. It still works the same. So now when I run it, enter a number 55, 66. Now it says it's a class int, and it gives me the mathematical total of 55 plus 66. So when you're taking input from a user, if you want it to be a number, you have to cast it to a number before you start using it. And if you forget, and a lot of you will, and that's perfectly normal because I've done it many times. If you forget, then you will get something you don't want. For instance, no, times won't work. But yeah, in this case, it just concatenates them instead of adding them. Questions on this? Okay. It's something you will get used to working with because we are going to take a lot of inputs. Yes, inputs are by default strings, always. So, and if I did something like, well, here I've cast them into integers, but what if I didn't put an integer? Put a couple strings, then it's going to give me an error, right? I could also do this, of course. I could cast them to floats, which are simply numbers that have a decimal, although, let's see if that works. Yeah. So it's nice to me. I didn't explicitly put a decimal place in, but it converted them to a float. But now it includes the decimal in the total. All right. Okay, so let's, now that we've sort of our introduction to input, let's continue with our if. So we can combine our Boolean expressions with mathematical expressions. So we know math expressions will evaluate to a number, and then we can take whatever number is evaluated in here and compare it. So this will evaluate to 7, and then we can compare it to 8, and that will give us something. We can do complex mathematical expressions and then embed them with a comparison operator. You can do that with strings as well. So let's see here. Yeah, this is the one. All right, so if I said 3 plus 4 less than 8, oops, and that says true. So it does the math for me and then evaluates it. So 2 plus 3 times 4 less than 8, that says false. So this would evaluate to 20. 20 is not less than 8, so that gives me a false. And yeah, no, that's just what we looked at. We can combine it with other expressions as well. So we can use the concatenation operator for strings. So this plus will put them together and ask if it's, so what I'm asking here is the resulting string of this operation the same as this string? And in this case, it would say true. Let's see here. So A plus B equal AB. And that says true. So yeah, you can combine a lot of operations as long as at the end, it evaluates to a Boolean. All right, so Python understands the logic operators. I did sort of show you that a little bit, but we haven't gotten to it explicitly yet. So you can use the not operator, you can use the and operator, or the or operator. So we can make complex expressions now. All right, so yeah, if I say not 4 equals 5 and 2 equals 2, now again, it's going to, so the first thing it's going to evaluate is, sorry. Well, actually, that's a good question. I'm not sure if it evaluate that not 4 first, or if not, let's try that out. Sorry, I'm just curious about which order of operations is going to take precedence here. If not 4 equals 5 and 2 equals 2, that still works. Yeah. So it's always a good idea to test these things. So what's happening is this 4 equals 5 is being evaluated first, and then the not's being applied, and then the and, right? So this will evaluate to true, and this will evaluate to true, and anding them both together evaluates to true. So I was curious actually if it was going to evaluate this before evaluating this, but it turns out, so this would be the way it did it is the sensible way to do it. So 4 equals 5, and then apply the not. It could have done this first, and then compared the false, or the true that, yeah, the false there to this 5, but that's not what happened. Yeah, double equals before not. All right. Good. And I'm sure if not, that would also apply to any of these other operators. 4, 3, and 2 equals 2 is greater than 1. Yeah. So yes, these mathematical comparison, or these comparison operators, I guess they're not necessarily mathematical, they get evaluated first. And then we jump into the boolean logic, the boolean expressions. So the not and the and then the or. All right. Questions? Yeah. So we can get into more complex math as well. So first the math will get evaluated, right? If I'm correct here. Always good to check. So if 1 plus 1 equals 2, yeah, it must evaluate the math first. True. Yeah. Okay, so it evaluates the math first, and then the greater than, less than, equality operators, and then the and or. And when in doubt, just wrap it in brackets to make sure that that it evaluates in the correct order. Yeah. So here I have here, though, everything's been made explicit with brackets, right? So I'm going to take the deepest set of brackets. So that would be here and here. So that gets evaluated to 9, that gets evaluated to 5, that gets evaluated to 0. And then it's going to do the comparisons. So it will get false and true or true. And then it goes into the deepest set of brackets again. So we get false or true, and then down to true. All right. Questions on that? Okay, so often we want to say, well, if it's true, do one thing, or if my condition is false, then please do something else. Rough material for Monday morning, yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, Monday, quarantine, dead of winter, all of those things. Need stronger coffee. Does it get harder from here on out? No, you kind of have to cover the hard stuff first, right? And then after it gets sort of fun, now it's a rise and grind. You have to understand how this stuff works, and then you can start playing with it, right? So that's, and my advice, as always, is just to, if you're not sure, just experiment. You have that prerogative. You don't have to, everything's open book. This should be sort of, it's supposed to be a bit of a playful class. I know the first little bit is a grind, though. Yeah. All right, so we'll get into some coding pretty soon. So hopefully some of this will starting to lighten up a little bit. So sometimes we want to, maybe if it evaluates to true, we want to do one thing, but if it evaluates to false, we want to do something else, right? So then we can put an else condition in with our if statement to do that. Again, the syntax is very important. You must have a colon after the condition and also after the else. Everything indented is run after if the condition is true. That's the if block. This is called the else block. Again, if it's all indented, that will all get run if this condition is false. Make sure you indent, and this code is run regardless, and you'll notice that it's on the same indentation level as our if and else. All right, so this is our code from before where we took 2 digits as input, and then, the old code just did this or else did nothing. But now we're going to say, well, if it's false, then we want to say B is greater, although more accurately, it could also be equal, but let's just pretend that this works. So yeah, now our branch has, it had 2 operations before, but the second operation just went straight through and did nothing. Now we could actually do something in this false, if our condition evaluates to false. All right, so let's combine some of these things that we did, and let's try and do a little bit of a mental exercise. So what is the input of this statement? Or what is the output? So is it going to print 1, or is it going to print 3, or is it going to print both? Or... Yeah, 3, right? So yeah, you guys are pretty, so you guys are on the ball. So this is 5 times 3, that evaluates to 15. And then it asks, is 15 less than 12, which is false. And that means we go into the else block. So it's going to print out 3, and then the answer is B. Yeah, coffee helps, yeah. Is output by default numeric or string? So when I print, this is, yeah, that's a good question, because print always prints strings. But when I print a number by itself, it converts it to a string for me. However, if I try to do something like this, A, and then I say +1, it's going to give me it can't combine a string with a number, right? So in this case, it converts it to a string for me. In this case, it does not. Now it's looking at it as an expression. So Python does a lot of things to make things convenient, and sometimes those things can be a little bit inconsistent. But right, so print 1, prints out a 1, print, even if I have nothing in my string, it's going to give me a type error. So in this case, I have to convert that 1 to a string first by casting it to a string, and then it'll print out 1. Yeah. Any other questions? And it's always a good idea to sort of test this code out, right? So we discuss it, it gets evaluated. We're pretty sure we're correct, but let's double check. So if I write that out, it prints out 3. So yeah, this is indeed evaluating to false, and then it prints out my 3 here. Okay, so let's do a little bit of programming. So write a program that asks the user for their age. If they enter a number of 19 or over, it says they can enter the bar. Otherwise, it says they cannot. Okay, so let's use our little if statement. So we want to ask a user for their age. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about input, right? So I can say input, and that will just take a string from the user. So if I run this, it doesn't tell me anything, but it's, sorry, I'm on the wrong line, but it's asking for a string. So I can enter that. But input also acts as print, right? So I could say, please, or what is your age, please? And I'm going to leave a space there just for formatting purposes. So this is actually very similar to if I just said print, what is your age, please? and then ask for input, right? And let's say, well, we want to put this in a variable. So let's put it in an A. So these two are nearly equivalent. The difference is this print actually gives me a new line before the input, whereas this, the input will be on the same line. All right, so yeah, the input by default takes input from the user, but it also sort of, you know, gives you this little bit of convenience where I can print out strings at the same time. All right, questions, or is that clear? Coffee kicking in? Okay, so what is your age, please? So now I have some input, and then the programming task, if they enter a number 19 or over, it says they can enter the bar, otherwise, otherwise not. Yeah. Well, shouldn't you also put an int before input since the age is an integer? Yes, that is a good point. So I can put it up here like this. That's perfectly valid, and if you're comfortable with that, go ahead and do it. I do like to, especially in the beginning, I like to break down. So not Java, Python's very expressive, and you can combine a lot of statements together to do a lot in one step. But I'm going to break it down. I'm going to break it down as much as possible so that you can see each individual step. Sorry for the first line you wrote. Why was there just brackets with no number in them? So yeah, let's print. So I can do this, right? I can say, well, I can't put A equal to that. So let's just start with, okay, so I'm going to run this. It says, what is your age, please? I'm going to put 19, and it's going to print out my age as a, not my age, but an age as an int. So yeah, you can break down, this input just takes input from the user. So there's no string in them. Now I can combine this print and this input in one step by doing this. Right, so now it's going to print out that string and ask the user for an input in that one step. But you can use it without a string, that's fine. So let's make sure that this runs. 19, so it prints out 19. Okay, so now I have a piece of working code here. I can take an input from the user, I convert it to a number, and I print it to the screen. And I really recommend, honestly, when you're writing programs, to start this way. Start with something very, very simple. Get some input, make sure that the input is correct. All right, so now the next step we want to do is we want to check to see if they're 19 or older. Okay, so we've taken input, we've converted it to an integer. Let's say if A is greater than or equal to 19, right? So that's our age limit. So if they're 19 or older, then we will print welcome to the bar, please wear a mask. Okay, so again, that's the one thing I don't like about idle, is the editor is a little bit weird. It won't scroll, there's no scroll bars, you just have to move it around. Okay, so let's just make sure that so far what we have so far actually works. So it says, what is my age? Welcome to the bar, please wear a mask. So everything I've done so far is working. You add an else statement after that? Absolutely. So yeah, one thing I could do is I could say if A is less than 19, print you are too young. right? So that's going to work. Let's try it. Run. What's your age, please? 18. You are too young. But we know that, if this is not true, then this must be true, right? If A is not 19 or more, then it must be less than 19. So I could just put an else, right? And that'll, logically, that's the same thing that I just had. It says you are too young. Right? Questions? Okay. So yeah, this is our first little program. Can you add an and statement too? Yeah. I could say something like this, and so where would you put the and statement? I could do this, or A is equal to 19. That's the same thing as saying A is greater than or equal to 19. Logically, this is the same thing as I just wrote. 19, welcome to the bar, please wear a mask. So if either of these are true, then it goes in here. Otherwise, it's false. If I put an and, then both of those must be true, and that's what's called a contradiction, because this could never actually be true, no matter what I put in. So what is my age? Let's say 55. You are too young. So this will always evaluate to false. Any other questions? Or did I answer your question? I'm not sure. All right, perfect. Okay, let's see. Write a program that asks the user for an integer, then prints if the number is even or odd. Okay. Let's make a new file. Save it. It wants you to save it before you can run it. So ask the user for an integer. So A equals input. Please enter a number. Right, and then I want to convert that, since it's a string, I want to convert it into a number. Now you can combine these if you're comfortable doing that. You can absolutely combine these steps into this. That's no problem. For the most part, though, I'm going to continue to do things in separate lines as much as possible. So I have a number now. I want to check if it's even or odd. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another mathematical operator. The modulus. I think this is it. If I try and run a condition in idle, it says syntax error and highlights the colon. Are you trying to run it from the interpreter or from a saved file? Saved file, huh? And it's giving you so is your condition, maybe it's in your condition, there's some sort of syntax error. What exactly are you writing there? You found it. Okay. I see. All right, unclose parentheses. Yeah. Okay. So this is what's called the modulus operator. So what this does is it, make sure I got it right though. So what this does is it divides A by 2 and sees if there's a remainder, right? So either 2 divides into A evenly, in which case the remainder would be 0. But if A is odd, then it'll divide into, 2 will divide into it and leave 1 as a remainder, if you can remember your math. So this is how we would check if a number is even or odd. So print the number is even. Okay, let's see if I got that operator correct. 5, the number is odd. Yeah, so that's, I was a little bit worried. I keep confusing it with Java, but I got that one right. All right, so yeah, you don't have to, this is the modulus operator. It's not super important that you understand it, but it does help. And it is a simple way to check to see if a number is even or odd, right? So yeah, any questions on this? Okay. All right, so somebody was asking earlier, and we did sort of touch on it, but yeah, you can nest if statements, right? So I can look at this code block, and I can run any code that I want, even another if statement. So now I have my code will branch in a lot of different directions, depending on what my conditions evaluate to. And yeah, so, and then in the else clause as well, or in the else block as well, I can put another if state. So if I look at basically how my, what sort of path my code is taking, it's going to start to look a lot like a tree. Of course, it all comes together at the end, but, it branches out here and then it branches out again. And technically I can branch out, somebody was asking how many times, I'm not sure, but I've never actually run into an issue of branching out too many times. So yeah. Let's just for fun, let's run this code. See. All right, so we're going to enter 2 numbers, and then if A is greater than B, it's say A is greater, or if A is less than B, it'll say B is greater. Otherwise, it'll say they're equal. Right, so if I enter my first number as a 5 and my second is a 6, it says B is greater, have a nice day. Let's see if we can, when they're the same, it says they are equal. And if I run and say 9, 5, then A is greater. So yeah, in each case, it evaluates correctly by following the proper path, which you could see here. Some people find it easier to look at these flowcharts. Other people are okay with the code, but whatever works for you. All right, questions on that? All right, now you have to be careful with your indentations now. So I could do something like this. If this, so let's say I take this and I put it in the if block. So if A is less than B, or A is greater than B, yeah. Do something like this. So I could say if they're equal, then print they are equal. And now I have to be careful because of this last else statement. B is greater, right? So now I have it indented here, but what I actually want is to have this. They're equal, yeah. So this is working now, but if I'm not careful, I could have something where I have my else statement in the wrong block. So just be aware that, yeah, that is an error that I've made before. So, all right. Okay, what is the output of this piece of code? Is there a way to turn off auto indent on idle? There are adjustments for it. We'll take a look at that in a second after we get through this. AD, well, let's see. So if I was going to, just to, trace through step by step, so x is equal to 13. That means 13 is less than 15, so this will evaluate to true. If x is greater than 18, well, that's not true, so we will print b. And then this whole else clause does not get executed. So yeah, I think the answer should be B. But so the gold standard is, I guess, try it out. So we said the claim is it'll print B and it prints B. So yeah, so we can, walk through the code step by step and evaluate these things. All right, so yeah, the indentation. So one thing you can do if you're having trouble, for instance, what is this? This is a tab. If I do this, is it going to complain? No. So I must have it so that my tabs and my tabs are printing as spaces so that I don't have a problem. But if I go to Tabify region, all right. So now I think everything will be tabs, and if I do this, it might complain at me. Yeah. So inconsistent use of tabs and spaces in indentation. So if you get that and everything seems to be lining up, what you want to do is go into Format, either Tabify or Untabify region. So it's either going to, in this case, it's going to give me back all spaces. If I do Tabify, it'll turn everything into tabs. So just be aware that that's the one thing where Python is a little bit sticky and a little bit of a pain, is if I copy and paste some code and the code is using tabs and I'm using spaces, then it's going to complain. So most Python editors have some way to make everything the same. And auto indent, yeah. Options maybe, configure. General. I'm certain there is, but off the top of my head, I'm not sure how. But yeah, there's lots of stuff you can, you can play with the font, you can play with the colors. It's not the best editor, but it's not the worst either. So, all right. Any other questions? Can you manipulate imported data in Python? Yeah. You mean if I copy some code over and paste it, or? Yeah, absolutely. So I've been doing, I copied this in and then I can, A is the output. Or maybe you mean, are you allowed to for class? The answer is yes. So, even the best programmers don't reinvent the wheel, right? So they will use other people's code if it's available and it doesn't present some sort of legal issue. So small pieces of code you can copy and paste and manipulate, because you still have to understand how they integrate into your own code. If you use a large piece of code, you have to, generally speaking, credit the author, right? I don't expect that you'll run into that in this class. But so yeah, small pieces of code, you find them somewhere, something that works, you copy and paste, you play with it, you make it work with your code. That's perfectly normal. That's a lot of programming is that. Every time I write in JavaScript, I don't know what half that's. I'm not the best at JavaScript, but I can take code that works and put it in my code. So, any other questions? All right. All right. So write a program that asks the user for their age. If they enter a number of 19 or over, ask them for their ID. Okay. So do I still have the ID? Yeah. So this is the other piece of code. Now we're going to embed another if statement in it. So if they're if they're 19 or older, or if they claim they're 19 or older, we're going to ask, may I see your ID? So I'll say ID equals input if they have ID, it lets them in, otherwise not. So yeah. And it's always a good idea in these cases to say, so I'm taking input from the user, I'm putting it in this ID variable. However, it's often a good idea to specify what I'm looking for. So maybe I'll put YN there to say that please enter yes or no. All right, so then if ID is equal to Y, so if they give me the ID, I'll say, well, welcome to the bar, please wear a mask. So I'm going to take this. Now to put it in my if block, I can simply indent it and then maybe get rid of this space. Otherwise, I'll print no ID, no entrance. So let's try and run that. So what is my age? 19. May I see your ID? Let's put yes. Welcome to the bar. Please wear a mask. May I see your ID? No. No ID, no entrance. All right. And really, if I run this, 19, may I see your ID? I can put anything other than Y, and it'll just assume that it's no in this case, because I've only really checked to see if it's equal to the Y character. And any other character, I just deny them entrance. All right. Questions on that? You guys following? So I remember last semester, a lot of people had trouble with this concept, actually. So if you do and you don't want to speak up now, that's fine. You can always hit me up on Discord or something. But yeah, I know that after this lesson, I taught the lesson, and then after I got a lot of questions. So write a program that asks the user for their age. If they enter a number of 19 or over, ask them for their ID. Otherwise, we're going to try and sneak in. Okay, so a couple things that are going to be different here. I got a syntax error when trying to put the else statement in. How is that fixable? So yeah, if you're trying to troubleshoot this stuff, I would start very simply, right? So yeah, check to see if you have a colon. You start with a very simple if statement. If whatever, true, print and then else print divide. Now, if you can get that working, which should be easy enough, then you can start, okay, now I can put my actual condition in here and then try and run it again and see if that works. So if it doesn't work, then you know the problem is in your condition statement. And then I can put my actual code in the blocks that I want, blah, 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 whatever it happens to be, run it again and see if I get an error then. So start with something that works, right? And then make little changes to that until you get it to the code that you want. But each step of the way, now you can check to see if it runs. And if it doesn't run, then you know where the mistake is, right? So I really recommend, and I mean, this is, to this day, I still do that. I write a little bit of code, get it working, and then add to it. If you try and write your whole program at once and then run it, then you get these bugs and they're tougher to track down. When you make little changes, it's easy to track down because I just wrote this one line of code and now it doesn't work. So obviously I know where the mistake is. So yeah, there's lots of little tricks like that that can help you avoid headaches, can help you avoid staring at your screen at 2 in the morning, wondering why your code's not running, which, by the way, everybody that programs has experienced. So when you experience it, please don't feel discouraged. Get help, ask somebody for help. That's usually the best thing. Get a second opinion on your code, take a break, all of those things. Bugs are, they're part of programming, but, so you have to learn how to deal with them, but there are ways to make them less of a problem. Okay, so in my second else case, now I want to see if they want to sneak in. So I'll say, no, that's a keyword. So I'll say I equals input. Would you like to sneak in? Now, if I is equal to yes, and again, I should put, it's always helpful to put what you expect the user to enter. So now I want to check to see if they can sneak in. So I want to use a random number. So I'm going to say import random. And then I'll say if random dot rand int greater than or less than or equal to 35, print all right. So I'm going to take my own advice here and I'm going to stop there and test it out because I got a few moving parts here now. So what is your age, please? So I want to be under 19. Do I want to try and sneak in? Yes. So yeah, I have a problem. One required positional argument. I think I have to do this. All right, so now I had a bug. You'll notice there was an error, but the amount of code I added was this. So I know my error is in here somewhere, and it's actually telling me it's in the rand int thing. Say 18. Would I like to sneak in? Yes. You are too young. Well, that's good. So I didn't make it in, but it printed this by default. So yeah, now I know this piece of code works, and I didn't have to go very far to track down the error. So now I can add an else statement. Print, the police are on their way. And I could just comment out that print statement because it doesn't really make sense in this context anymore. Now, what is my age? 18. Would you like to sneak in? Yes. The police are on their way, so I did not make it. Let's try it a couple more times. Police are on their way. So now I'm starting to wonder, what is my number? What is my random number? So let's say num equals, I think we're running out of time here, but yeah, if I want to take a peek at my random number, so now I can store this in a variable and then use it the same way, but I could also print it out to see what number is coming out. Would I like sneak in? Would I? 36, the police are on their way. All right, so I almost made it in that time. Random and randint, yes. So random is what we talked about as a module. So what it is it has a bunch of, I guess, methods that we can use associated with it. So one of them is this randint method. So what it does is, in this case, it's going to take a number between 1 and I believe 99 actually. So it might be better if I put 0 here. So it's going to take a number between this number and 1 less than this number at random. So I can do that for things like if I want to, sometimes I want my program to do this, sometimes I want my program to do that, or just other times you just need random numbers. You'll see it a few more times. Here we're doing it to check a percentage, like a dice roll, like gambling, but yeah. Anyway, that's it for today. I'll stick around to answer any other questions you guys have, but what is it, Monday? All right, I'll see you guys on Wednesday.